Poor Chris Novak. He brought in a box of what I'll likely call swag, given to us by the people who do the hiatus and Falmouth sprint triathlon. So I'll put it out after the meeting for anyone who wants that. Before we launch in, I want to ask, aside from 3 people I know of, Adam, Chris, and Eki, anyone else here done a triathlon or endurance event in the 1980s? Okay. Ah, we got one. You're going to join our panel?
No, I did a winter one in Canada in February. Skiing and sprint.
We may want to bring you up for that. Well, our club is lucky that we have 8 or 9 folks who have were here really early on at the beginnings of triathlon on Cape Cod. Bill Riley's down in Florida, and then some others are unable to come. But we have 3 who are coming tonight. Actually, we have 2.5, so I'm going to probably have to coerce Adam to come up because but he's had triathlon, he's been in triathlon since, I think, '84, just here in Massachusetts. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Eki, Adam, and Chris to have a seat at the table, and we're going to have a little conversation with them about the early beginnings of triathlon in Massachusetts and Cape Cod.
Hope it's not too different.
Gentlemen, we'll push on.
I forgot.
And we're almost at the Becky, most of you know, former president of the Cape Cod Athletic Club, and such a quiet, unassuming guy. I knew him for many years before I realized he had done the Hawaii Ironman. Adam, you know, our treasurer, and still a standout age grouper, and has been doing triathlon now for, what would that be, 40 years? 30 years?
30 years.
Yeah, wow. And Chris Hafferty, who is the very first director of the Cape Cod Triathlon team.
Andy, you do it.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, I'm good at talking people into things. And Chris is not only a longtime Cape Codder, but he is like one of those guys straight out of Baywatch. He was ocean-going lifeguard and lifeguard instructor and head of the lifeguards out on the outer beach doing the most difficult rescues out there. And I think, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think stemming out of that experience of the lifeguard competitions and just that macho Maddox, he still got the mustache, aura of the day, that as soon as he heard there was any kind of tough event, Chris was all over it, and has been for a while. So anyways, I'm going to let them talk mostly. Feel free to ask questions. I've got a couple of questions if we don't get to a couple of subjects. And I'll just ask Howard real quick, time-wise, what are we looking at here? Or maybe I should ask the group, when do you want to get out of here?
8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Get 12 minutes.
Hey, trivia questions for you.
Sorry, it's a sprint.
And the
All right.
reward,
All right.
someone right now watching card, so the reward, if anyone gets this right.
So let's do this chronologically. What do you guys think was the first triathlon here on the Cape?
1981.
1971.
That's what I thought you were going to say. So maybe Chris can fill us in on some of that.
Let me get done with the trivia question first, for all you runners out there. What was the first American company to produce a running shoe, and what was the model called?
Nike.
What?
Reebok.
No.
Nike.
Reebok is not
The
an American
waffle.
company. Nike's not, well, no,
Was it the
before
waffle?
Nike.
Before Nike.
Yeah.
Converse.
What?
Converse?
Converse.
No, nope.
Puma.
Nope, Puma's Europe, Puma and,
New Balance.
New Balance, and what was the model number? What was the model?
Number one.
One.
No, what was the model?
Oh, one.
It was called the Ripple Sole. It was the first running shoe produced in this country, in Cambridge, by New Balance, and sold at one of, if not the first running store, which was Marathon Sports, in their first shop was in Cambridge on Mass Ave. So you win a free swimming lesson whenever you're ready.
In the ocean.
So what happened in 71?
I did a little research after Andy called me yesterday, and like anything else, people here know the history of the Ironman, which is now what everything evolves around in triathlon. It was a bunch of guys having a few beers at a bar, trying to decide which of the three events that already existed in Hawaii was the most difficult. And there was a 2.25 mile channel swim, which still exists today. There was a 112 mile bicycle event. I don't know if it was a race, which was the length of the road around Oahu, and the 26.2 mile Honolulu Marathon. So as they had more and more beers,
Seemed like a good idea.
and argued further and further which of the three events was the toughest, they then decided who could do it on a single day. And that's how lots of things start. All right? And I did as lifeguards, we were always running and swimming with National Park Service. And as soon as the supervisors were gone, we would run and swim further to see who could go from Coast Guard Beach to Nauset Light, or who could go, or after having more and more beers the previous night, who could swim from Coast Guard Beach to Marconi, which is 3.5 miles in very cold water. And then you'd get there and you'd realize you'd forgotten to figure out how to get back. And you had to get back to work at 9. And so you'd run back on the beach. And so that's how things began. And we trained for an event called a biathlon. And the biggest biathlon in Massachusetts, one of the biggest in the country, was in Lake Boone in Hudson, Mass. And so I went to the internet to see whatever happened to that race. And I found on the internet that it wasn't just a biathlon, that back in the 40s, this organization, this community, summer community in Lake Boone, would put on a race by the Boston Athletic Club, not the BAA, the BAC. And they would have a run followed by a swim in Lake Boone, and sometimes would add a canoe race to it. So back in the 40s, people were doing triathlons, not so much with bicycles, but where they run, a swim, and a canoe. And I'm sure that someone could come up with something. This was like on a 15-minute trying to hunt around the internet, how far back do these things go? And they go back quite a distance. And the first race I remember that was a triathlon, we were training for the biathlon again, and we'd have these races at night that we'd put on. And one guy was a ski racer, Ed Glees, and he used to ride a lot. He was a pro ski racer and a lifeguard to get ready for his skiing season. And he kept bugging us, let's do a bike race, let's do a bike race. Nobody had a bike. So, but finally, just to shut him up, we borrowed bikes. This was 1971, and we started with the bikes and rode intro up around Pamet, which is a big loop, down Old Kings Highway. At that time, the Pamet Road was connected, North and South Pamet. Subsequently, the oceans washed through them. But you could ride that circle down to Old Kings Highway, dumped the bikes at one of the guards' house, ran down Route 6 to Long Pond Road, swam Long Pond, and that in 1971. And if you look in Tom Long with the San Diego Club, they credit themselves with the first triathlon in 1974, which they probably deserve it because like yourself, they're a club and somewhat organized with a calendar and stuff, as opposed to just a bunch of lifeguards trying to figure out something different to do. So that's my recollection of some of the first triathlons on Cape Cod and where they stem from.
Was that just a year, or did that go on for several years?
We would do a great lead, if you ever, the reason the Ironman in Hawaii took off, in my opinion, was Sports Illustrated was there and wrote a great article in 1979. And I can remember reading it and thinking, oh, I'd like to do that, but I don't want to go all the way to Hawaii and do that. If I'm going to go to Hawaii, I want to go surfing. So we did one, we did it for 3 years, 1980, 1981, 1982. We started at Green Harbor in Marshfield, and we swam to the Powder Point Bridge in Duxbury, and we ran across that because Duxbury wouldn't let us drive our cars over. Everybody had to have their own crew, just like in the original Hawaiian Ironman. And your crew was responsible for making sure you got from point A to B and give you food along the way. And just like in the Hawaiian one, since nobody had done it before, we thought, could we kill ourselves doing this? There was this arbitrary decision that if you lost more than 10% of your body weight from the beginning of the swim to the end of the bike, you could not continue. And so we stuffed ourselves on the bike ride the entire time. And every year I did this, I gained 4 pounds. From Green Harbor to Barbertown, I would gain weight. Or from Green, to the checkout. Because on the bike, you would just peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, bananas, and your crew would drive up to you and they would say, what do you want? And you'd say, give me a banana! And by the way, nobody trained for this. You just did it. And you were in good shape, and the thing was, I wonder, just like the guy sitting on the bar, I wonder if anyone could do this. Nobody trained for the first Hawaiian race. They just went out and did it. And so, your crew would pull up, and you'd be in a bad mood because you were miserable. And it was just, your ass was miserable because you hadn't sat on a bike ever prior to doing this. And so, you'd get on the bike at Powder Point Bridge, and we rode to Marconi Beach. And then from Marconi Beach, we would run into Heaven Cove Beach, which was only 21 miles, but that's where we ended it because we ran out of real estate. And it seemed like a good place to end it. So that was 1980, 1981, 1982. And the motto of it was no entry fee, no t-shirt, no complaints. So, those are some of the things I remember of how things kind of get going. And great things get going with people just sitting around looking for the adventure of it.
Now you're getting into the time zone where Dave McGilvray first started getting involved. Were you in on that early on, or?
Yeah, followed a lot of his races up around Boston. And then just to go back with a comment that Chris made was that no one knew how to train or no one knew how to fuel themselves, and it was like an act of survival doing the triathlons in the early days. And you and your friends would pat yourself on the back just to finish. And then as time progressed with different training devices, the aero bars and so on and so forth, and the food consumption, and then they actually started racing the races to see who could compete faster and, of course, win. But in the early days, you were just happy to compete and finish and get the t-shirt without killing yourself or falling off your bike or drowning and so on and so forth. But, the safety issues that they have in place now, a million times better than they used to have. I mean, I don't even think they had lifeguards out there in the early days when they were swimming and stuff. But yeah, Dave McGilvray had a ton of them. We followed those up around Boston. He would even actually give out Ironman slots to Hawaii.
Bay State was a qualifier.
Bay State was a qualifier, and I remember in the early 90s, Steve Edwards actually won a lottery to go to Hawaii, and I said, how the hell did that guy get to win that, And that's how we went to Hawaii in the early 90s. And I think even the sprints, they gave away some Ironman slots. And then after that, it just started to catch on that if you doing triathlon, the holy grail was go to Hawaii. And so I think I spent the better part of 10 to 15 years just trying to qualify to get there. And tons of money, tons of training all over the country. Because every time there was qualifying events just about all over the country. And every time you get closer, there's another guy that's just a little bit faster. So you go to another race, and there was another guy that was a little bit faster. So I don't think I ever got past third place trying to win a coveted Ironman slot. And then, so I just said, the heck with it, I put my name in the lottery one year, and that's how I got there, 2003.
And these McGillivray races, they were shorter than
Yeah.
full Ironman.
The
And-
longest one was a half Ironman that they would have up in Bay State in the early days.
Yeah, it was a 40-mile bike ride, a 10-mile run, and a mile swim in a pond.
In the pond.
2 transition areas.
And that's when you got involved, right?
That was my first one in '84, yes.
Yeah. And there wasn't anything fancy about it. You just showed up with your old, bike from Sears, or my first bike was a Shogun that God only knows where that came from. And you just pedaled and pedaled and rode, and you felt the pain, and you just kept going. Until 1994, when they had the Ironman on the island. That was the big push locally for a lot of guys when they went to Martha's Vineyard.
There was one in the Cape too, what year was that? They had it on TV?
86, I think it was. And Rowley was in it, and I think Steve Edwards was in it. I don't know how I got by that one, but there were several local guys, and again, the first time you do one, you have no idea what you're up against. So you don't think about everything that you're supposed to be doing, you just do it to survive. And then as time went on, then your brain starts thinking more about speed, endurance, and all this other stuff, and that's when your brain takes over your body and you start to have too many problems. You start thinking too much. On the island, we swam, and that was great. We said, oh, okay, we didn't drown. And then we were on the bike riding around in loops out there, and that was fine, and but your butt was killing you. And then the run, it was just like, you run to each water stop, and you ate, drank, and you had a good time, and then you just kept on going. And I think actually it was the fastest one I ever did in like 11 and a half hours. And then after that, it was just downhill because I started thinking too much. And started training too much.
Martha's Vineyard,
Martha's Vineyard, yeah.
a full Ironman distance.
Ocean swim. Bill Riley was there, and I asked him what to do. I says, I don't really swim well. And he says, well, put on whatever you have. I didn't even have a wetsuit. I put my skin diving suit on, pants at the top. And I was out there swimming with all these guys, and the waves were humongous, up and down, back and forth. I think guys were actually throwing up in the water. Anyway.
Sounds like fun.
That was a rough swim. That's fun, yeah.
Steve Edwards was hoping to be here. He couldn't, as was Bill Riley, he's still in Florida. And both of those guys competed in that very first Ironman on Cape Cod. None of you guys ever did that, what they called it, what was it, Bud Light Endurance Fest or something like that, they called it back then. And that was a swim at Craigville Beach, a bike out to Provincetown and back, and then a run out to Falmouth and up to Woods Hole or Sandwich and then back down. None of you guys were on that one.
No, I don't know how I got by it. I missed it.
What about the short races? Those were McGillivray events until Richie Havens took
Oh,
over?
yeah, all those, yeah. We used, you had to travel off Cape, but I remember, again, training for all that.
There was a race before McGillivray called, put on to raise money for the track in Boston, by the track coach, at the time, a guy named Rich, I can't remember his last name. Matter of fact, the Falmouth Road Race was started to raise money for the brand-new girls' track club in Falmouth. And that's why Tommy Leonard started that race, because the school didn't have any money for girls' track program, and that's why the Falmouth Road Race started. So I think it was the Windjammer.
But the Windjammer was the
Linehan.
home spot, yeah.
Yeah.
And Mark Serpent,
Super, yeah.
with his white sunglasses.
Yeah.
But a lot of the guys actually took it pretty seriously after that. They finally realized that they could do it, and they could do it successfully. Then the training issues came in where, they started putting it all together. And of course, once it got televised on TV from Hawaii, then it just spurred the whole thing. And the worst part about it now is just so darn expensive. What's the latest? The last one I tried to get into was in New York, when they had that one, the Ironman just started, they swim in the Hudson River. I think the entry fee was like $900. And I think it filled up in less than 4 hours or something. That was the end of that. So that's the thing about it, by the time you get done with, your $7,000 bicycle, your transportation, the entry fee, it's quite an expensive sport now, so, yes.
How many athletes were competing in those races back in the early 80s when Chris was describing it? How many people were out there with?
We didn't have any trouble finding a parking spot at the store.
Just, whoever showed up.
Yeah.
And it was just like, this is what we're gonna do next week, on Saturday, who wants to do it. And I think, the races from Green Harbor were maybe first year 5 people, we did it 3 years, the last year maybe 12 people. Most of them lifeguards, not all of them, and it was that very first one in 71 was just a group of lifeguards and this newly married couple that showed up, who were friends of one of the lifeguards who were doing it, and they decided, it was their honeymoon, and they decided to do it. And so now we're at the pond, and the sun has gone down, and it's dark. And she gets there, and we have to put out the lights on the car so she can swim the triangle of the course, and we can see her, and he never gets there. And I don't remember what, if anything, happened to him, because we all just left. And went to this restaurant and had a great time. And, whatever happened to him, the groom, and she went with us,
Maybe that's the plan.
I have a question for you guys. Becky mentioned it earlier about the $7,000 bike. Can you talk a little bit about the early years that you did triathlon and what you wore and what you rode? And talk a little bit about how there's this huge industry that has blossomed now, and all these companies that have found these niche markets, and people in this room, some people in this room, some people not in this room, that spend all this money on high-end wetsuits, certain amount of neoprene, Zoot, Specialized, Quintana Roo, all these companies that didn't even exist, carbon fiber, never mind aero bars, different component groups, all of this stuff. And all these running shoes that have come out, and all these low profile, the clothing, the race suits and all that, and what you wore back then, and can you reflect on, this is what we wore, if we wore this, we would do this, and in fact, if I was in shape and rode this bike from Sears or wherever it was, instead of this $7,000 bike or $12,000 bike and this wetsuit, does it really matter? Or is it in fact the engine itself, the human engine, that makes it work? I'd be interested in your perspective on all that, and all the money that has been spent on all this stuff. So I want my money back.
Better off getting your money back. Because like I said, it all comes from yourself, whether it's physical or mental. And there was no such thing. I don't even think we wore a wetsuit in the early days. You just put a pair of shorts on and
there was no such thing as a wetsuit.
you swam in those, you got out, you ran your bike, and I used to run with those high-top Converse sneakers. It didn't really even matter, as long as you had something.
And you borrowed a bike.
Borrowed a bike. I think I used a football helmet, because you had to have a helmet. And I think in '81, I got down there and they said you need a helmet.
You know, I don't have any issues with it. Well, I used to belong to a track club that was called the Hack Spot Track Club. And Hack was a golfer, had a little bar in Katuitt. Anyone remember that place?
Yeah, I still got a shirt from there.
And Hack could care less about running, but there was a group of guys that decided to have a track club there. Of course, and beer, everything involved around beer and drinking. And there were guys in that club. They would do the marathon every year, and their total training for the marathon was 26.2 mile run in the marathon.
Yeah.
Yes. They would get to the starting line having run Zippo from the year before, and just Jimmy Hall was a state trooper, and you know, and these guys were all big like I am now, and it was just, the first Boston Marathon I did, I lived in Charlestown. I walked to Boston Garden with Jock Semple, who was the race director back then, was a masseuse. And he had a little masseuse area in the second floor of the garden, and so I looked around, found it, went up, there was these, you know, cop directed me to where it was, and knocked on the steel door. There was no sign on it. Nobody answered. I knocked on the other door, it was a room closet. I walked down the stairs, I get to the bottom of the stairs, and all of a sudden I hear this big Scottish accent cursing me out. You know, what was wrong with me, you know, why didn't I come in? So you go in, and there are 2 massage tables, and a heater on the side with his soup, his lunch getting warm. He had a big old fat guy who was massaging on one table, and he had a desk half the size of this, and all the applications for the marathon piled up on that. And he ran the whole thing from that office by himself. And just went down, and if you could put up with his cursing you out for coming so late. I mean, I walked in there like 3 days before the marathon and signed up. You know, there were no qualifying times. And he'd ask you, have you run one before? You'd lie, you'd say, oh yeah. You know? And I was a swimmer in college, I thought I was going to do great, and I'm running, you know, I think I'm going to finish in the top 10. And then I'm running in the middle of the race, and this guy with the 2 beer cans coming off his head goes by me on one side, and a little girl goes by me on the other, and I'm going, I guess I'm not cut out to be a marathon. And then when I finished my first one, I couldn't move. I was just so sore. I had to take, I tried to take, I had a 50 cents to take the T home to Charlestown. I couldn't get down the stairs, the subway stairs, because I was so stiff. So I hailed a cab, figured he'd drive me home. I go into my apartment in Charlestown. I tell the guy I'll be right out with the money. It took me so long just to walk into my apartment that the guy came in after me because he thought I was going to stiff him for the fee for the cab. But the thing I miss about, I don't have any problem with all the money that's being spent. If you have it and you want to do triathlons, that's great. Do you have to have it? No. But you know, you're going to do, you know what it's like when you're all runners. You know, the new sneaker comes out, it's an ounce less. And you know, you're going to run the marathon, you think you can take 10 seconds off your time, you can do it. You know, that's part of the fun of the sport. What I miss about the triathlon is all old, really nuts. The nuts that used to be attracted to it. There was an old guy who was a longshoreman in San Francisco, and he retired. Walt Stack. And this is one of the famous stories on Walt. He would always finish last in Ironman, and you had to finish it within 24 hours because everybody wanted to go home. You know, who was running it. So they're into like the 23rd hour, and when Walt is 4 miles away, according to somebody that went out looking for him. So they go, all right, great, you know, he'll be in with side of 24. I don't think there was a time limit. And they say, all right, great, he'll be in 4 miles, he'll probably be in, you know, maybe an hour, 45 minutes, whatever. And 45 minutes go by, no Walt. Hour and a half go by, no Walt. They go looking for him again. Nowhere to be found. They think, well, he was just 4 miles from the finish. You know, what happened? And so now they're a little concerned. They send people to look for him. What happened to Walt Stack? Finally, 3 hours later, he shows up at the finish line. And they're like, where were you? And he said, I was hungry, so I stopped for breakfast. True stories, and there were just a bunch of nuts like that, you know, who do this stuff. And that's the only thing I miss. In terms of your question, the equipment, I think that's all great. You know, it's all improvement, you know, and everybody's looking to improve. And that's, in anything in life, that's great. I just missed the nuts. I knew a lot of them.
You have to compensate with equipment as you get older. That's what I do.
What was your first bike, Adam?
I was a motor bacan, maybe, something like that, 10 speed, pretty basic.
Come pretty far.
What do you got now?
Yeah, what do you got now?
You all know.
Motor Bacan 12 speed?
I think some of the ladies here might be interested in this news report I came across when I was just looking at a few things today. The oldest, this is 1983, the oldest known triathlon finisher is a 59-year-old nurse from Kentucky who proves that dedication is just as important as ability. So that leads me to, what were the ages of most of the competitors way back, and what was the male-female breakdown?
I don't remember a lot of women.
No, I don't.
I remember Linda Fogel, who was a lifeguard. She, just like you mentioned, she wanted the first, and she went out to Hawaii. You could go out to Hawaii and just show up.
Yeah, just show
And
up.
do the race in the original days. And back then, it was still on water. And so, she was, I could sit here and tell you for hours, we're training, start at 5 in the morning, right through the lifeguard day, and then go into the night. And finally, when she gave up the dream, you kind of touched on this, about being a pro triathlete, and cut her training in half. She took hours off of her finishing time at Ironman, because she just overtrained, and did, too much all the time. So, she just came back to the beach. I don't know how old she is now, but she's raised her kids, she's back at the National Park Service, and she's still awesome. They put her back, she's terrific. Matter of fact, she just put on a race, and maybe, I'll make sure the club made aware of it. They put on a memorial race that was like 12 miles on the outer beach this summer for the first time. And Linda was the race director, and so she ran it the day before just to make sure it was a safe course, And so, I'll get in touch with you. I'll let Andy know when it's going to be next year, but it has a couple of water stops along the ways, and it's, those beaches out there are just isolated and beautiful. And it's, if you get away from the parking lot to the natural seashore, you'll see nobody. And so that was a nice race. I think it was in August. So, I'll pass that on. But yeah, just like anything else. I mean, when I got out of college, sports were done. Done. Nobody participated in sports when you got out of college. They weren't. And when I got out of college, there really weren't, before Title IX, there weren't any sports for women. Really. When I was in high school, it was, for women, it was field hockey, basketball, and track, or softball, and that was it. And it was the same gals doing all three sports,
In basketball, the women did not move around.
That's
They
right.
stood in one place and passed the ball.
The defense couldn't go over mid-court, and the offense couldn't come back past mid-court. And women, you all know the marathon story. Women weren't allowed to run marathons, and the medical reason was they would ruin their reproductive organs. That was the reason why women weren't allowed to run marathons.
Shows you how far we came. They were saying, I think it was Jock Sample who said, it's not ladylike to run a marathon.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And for example, the race that I just managed, the Andrew Holden race, 61% female, 39% male. If you look at statistics today, that's the way it's going.
Yeah.
You look at most races now, more than 50% female. That's how much has changed since I started 30, 40 years ago. It's amazing. A lot of young women don't know that.
Well, there were no women lifeguards in the national parks because, the theory was you couldn't do it. You weren't strong enough, you weren't good enough, you weren't fast enough. And now, I would say now, today, the best lifeguards on the beach are women. And they're college swimmers. Or they're surfers. Look at the big boom in female surfing. It all came from that movie, I think, Blue something. And now when I go out surfing, multiple surfing.
Save it. So, let me just throw the question back to the audience. What drives people now to triathlon? I know in the old days it was something to, a new sport, and people wanted to try it, and people wanted to see if they could survive it. But as things progressed, with the changes that are here now, you can see by the amount of people that sign up, it's a humongous sport. So, why are people being part of triathlon
I don't know,
now?
I mean, for me, it's the same as probably you. I'm a little crazy, and I really want to test my abilities. I
Adam?
want to see how far I can go and how far I can push myself.
I have a short attention span. I don't want to do anything really for a long period of time. That's why you do 3 different sports, you get all that, and you don't get bored.
It does help reduce the overuse injuries though too, because you're not only running, you're not doing 100 miles, 300 miles, 400 miles, you have to split it up. So it's built in, cross-training is built in, so that helps. There's a little bit of that. It makes it a little bit more, like some people can run forever and it's very interesting to them. They can run 1,000 miles, in a couple of weeks. But for some people, it's more interesting to do different things. And in a race, especially the shorter course, never mind the longer stuff, you're focused, you're doing something, then all of a sudden you got to change disciplines. It's also a little bit, I think it's a little bit more cerebral with transitions and those types of things. I mean, you can go out and run, and not to cut down on your runners, this is kind of a running club, but when you go out and do a marathon, and you go out running, and there's a lot of tactical to that. I don't disparage that at all. But in triathlon, you're doing an event, and then you have to think, you have to plan a little bit. I'm coming into transition, whether it's a sprint, Olympic, or Ironman, you got to get out of that wetsuit, because we wear wetsuits. I know in the old days, you used to wear like caveman outfits, but we wear wetsuits, and you got to get out of that wetsuit, you got to get the bike, you got to get into those shoes, you got to get out of transition, the clock's ticking, you got to get out, you got to do your bike, you're out there, now you're transitioning, it's a different muscle group, and now you're out there, and then you're coming back in, it's like, well, I got to get ready for the run, what do I need to think about? So there is some, for me, that's attractive that you have to start thinking about that. Now I got to go out and then do the run, and you're transitioning to the run, and on the run, you can't waste any time, certainly at the shorter distances that we mostly do, even the longer stuff. You can't burn a mile or two because your legs are dead, you got to turn them over and get out there. So it's just, there's a lot of changes, and I think there's a lot, for me, it's more attractive in that sense because it's, plus you get to wear cool outfits, so.
Yeah.
I'm all about that. I'm all about the fashion and the bikes, like Adam has 7 bikes and, all that. Built a big house because he has like 12 bikes. And,
You have a picture of your bike? There must be some
bike
great
and
bike.
call it bike porn.
He might be the best bike in the club.
I think he does, actually, yeah.
So who's chasing Ironman now?
We have some iron
You know, we've got
people.
a bunch of people in the club that have been doing it, more so the last couple of years than a lot of people in the club that have been really stepping up to the bigger distances.
So how do you get, now you got to qualify an Ironman to get a slot for Ironman in Hawaii, is that correct?
Yeah,
There are no more shorter races.
It's very competitive. Because like you were saying, more people are interested, races sell out all the time. And I think the logistics of putting on, obviously the Hawaiian race is etched in stone, it's always going to be one. But for a company, a race director to try to put on even a half iron or an Ironman, because of the geography and the footprint involved, it's a huge permitting process. So there aren't that many of them. So the ones that come out, the Patriot Half, is that sold out already? Patriot Half's already sold out, the gym, done. So it's like, there aren't that many of the longer distance races because people want to do them. So it's competitive for the slots, and basically you need to plan out the races you're going to do in triathlon in December for the next year if you're going to do the longer distances, or else it'll be sold out. and most of those don't have lockers. You just, so the sprints you can usually, or Olympics, you can usually show up a couple weeks before and register, not all of them. Cohasset sold out in 4 hours actually, so, but.
The qualifying for Hawaii standards kind of varies depending on the race too. It's, I think maybe even 10 years ago, it was top 3 in each age group and entry. Now it's, depending on the size of the race, you might get 7th place and still get a spot into Hawaii. And then also depending on who claims those spots too, you might come in 15th and if the top 12 people in front of you don't claim the spot, then you get that spot.
You know, I think I always said the Ironman, once you had to qualify to get in, it's the toughest ticket in sports. You know, because it's so competitive and there's so few. You know, in a way that, through marathon runners, it's, trying to qualify for Boston, when they kept dropping the times, and if your time was 3 hours and the next year you had to go 2:55, and you killed yourself to try to get to the 3 hour point. And all of a sudden they changed the rules and you're gonna go 2:55. So, I don't know, and that's just part of the challenge, and, so, and being a race director, you touched on that, is awful. I put on the Bud Light Falmouth race and the Boston race, and it was the politics trying to get a town, the permitting, the police, who who expect, who tell you how many cops you're going to have to pay for, and I had the Falmouth police tell me the morning of the race that the sergeant was calling the race off because he couldn't fill his slots that he decided he needed for the race. And fortunately, and he also told me that, since I didn't get the state police that I said I was going to get, he was calling it off for that reason. So I was driving a VW bus, and I stopped at the Greek Orthodox Church where Mike Dukakis was having a thing in Barnstable. And I pull in the parking lot, and I walk in, and I go up to him, and my mother was his 5th grade teacher. And I said, Mike, I need to get these state police for this race in Falmouth. I won't be able to put it on. And he gives me the name of someone to call. I call that person. He gives me the name of the captain of the state police. The captain of the state police chews me out. What kind of idiot am I to try to put on a big race in Falmouth in the middle of the summer? And he concludes with, what do you need? And I say, I need 6 motorcycle cops and 3 cruisers. What time? And I tell him, he says, they're all right. So I have the sergeant from the Falmouth Police Department tell me the race is over. I have 1,200 people getting ready to go in the water, which suddenly occurred to me was the largest ocean swim ever put on the East Coast. And that was just the first part of it. And what am I going to do with all this? And then all of a sudden I look over the sergeant's shoulders, comes 6 motorcycle cops and 3 cruisers. And I said to the sergeant, I said, you're right, we can't put the race on unless the state police are here. And by the way, will you turn around and tell the state police where you want them to go, And it's still, it's awful. I did race directing for 2 years, and it was like much tougher than training and doing it. It was awful. I'd never do it again.
Did anybody ever follow that the Bud Light series? And then they had the Coors Light Duathlon series back in the 90s.
Yeah.
I still have a picture of you up there on the field, up there in Waltham.
Yeah, that was fun back in the day, in the early 90s.
Yeah, Coors Light, Bud Light, and
I
then
went
it
to
got
Arizona in that.
into,
I went to Arizona for the championship.
yeah, and then it got into the whole thing of nationals. I think the duathlon's kind of died out now, but they had the Power Woman Duathlon series. Ended up going to Switzerland. Anyway.
What would you say is your favorite or worst course also? Which one would you think is the nicest one or the scenic one that you like the best as compared to one which was the worst because of whatever, the water's lousy and full of oil slicks or something like that? Because I remember talking to you one time, you did Cincinnati, Ecky, and you were in the Ohio
No,
River.
Louisville.
Was that Louisville?
Yeah, Louisville.
You were in the Ohio River.
Louisville was
If anybody
one.
knows anything about the Ohio River, it's not a place you want to go swimming. What do you
But
think?
then also there was one in Pennsylvania, that Skunkhill River. It was called the Skunkhill River. It was an Ironman qualifying. And you just had to go out in the middle of the river and just kind of tread water until it started. And I remember going under the water to get wet and you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. That's how dirty it was. And then after it was all over, you were talking to local people and they're saying, God, you swam in that river?
You could
Yeah, it
put a
was
match
part of the
to
race.
it, right?
And then there was, yeah, the one down in Kentucky. That was another piggish river there. It was kind of nasty. And then we also swam in the Hudson one year, and you never knew what was going to float by you from there. But,
When you talk about equipment, a thought just occurred to me. There were two pros brought into this Bud Light Series in Falmouth. In the swim, I could see lightning off in the distance. I pulled my starter's gun out of my pocket, waded into the water, and just started it. Boom, the gun goes off. The timing crew had just left from the Novice Swim Club because they weren't going to stand out in the rain. And so I had no timing crew for the swim. Pull the pistol out of my pocket, it's wet, I go, this isn't going off. Boom, it goes off, I thank God. You know, and the swim starts 5 minutes early. I'm looking at people in the porta potties, bursting out because they started the race 5 minutes too soon. And so the two selectmen are standing next to me and they're saying how they'll never have this race back again in Falmouth at Old Silver Beach. And the two pros, females, come out and just strip down naked, taking the bathing suits off, because there weren't any triathlon outfits. So you just stripped down naked, put on the biking equipment or the running equipment, and took off. And then I remember the Falmouth selectmen standing there going. The next thing they said to me was, "Are you coming back next year?"
Well, thank you, guys. It's 8:30, I think that's probably.
Thanks for having me.